My name is Samantha Reynolds, but at Titan Construction Group, most of my male colleagues refer to me as the spreadsheet sorceress, or more often, simply, Sam. I'm 36, a structural engineer by trade, and for the past 8 years, I'd been the quiet force behind some of the most ambitious skyscrapers on the city's skyline. I lived for the precision of steel, the integrity of concrete, the elegant dance between force and form. My joy came from seeing a structure rise, knowing that every beam, every bolt was exactly where it should be, perfectly designed to withstand the impossible. But in the world of high-rise construction, precision and integrity often played second fiddle to speed, optics, and who you knew. The shining star of our division, indeed of Titan Construction itself, was Mark Jensen. Mark was 42, effortlessly charming, with a perpetually sun-kissed tan from site visits that mostly involved long lunches with clients. He was the head of structural engineering, the one who presented at board meetings, schmoozed city officials, and whose face adorned every company brochure. Mark didn't do calculations. Mark did deals. He'd stride into my cubicle, usually around 5 p.m. on a Friday, glance at the complex stress models I'd spent 80 hours simulating, slap my desk with a flourish, and declare, "Brilliant work, Sammy. Just needs a little more grandeur." Then, he'd walk into the Monday morning meeting, present my entire week's output, and claim it as his visionary engineering. And then there was Richard Sterling, our project director. Richard was a towering figure both physically and in corporate hierarchy, sharp, impeccably tailored, and utterly ruthless when it came to budgets and deadlines. He loved Mark because Mark delivered the optics and kept projects moving. He tolerated me because I delivered the actual structural soundness, but quietly. My parents, both academics, had instilled in me the belief that quiet competence and verifiable data were their own rewards. In Titan Construction, it was a recipe for invisibility. For years, I told myself it didn't matter. The work itself was profoundly satisfying. I was paid well enough. I got to solve fascinating, multidimensional problems. But the resentment slowly, quietly, began to fester. The constant subtle dismissals. The way Richard would introduce Mark as the architectural genius behind our daring designs, while I was Samantha, who handles the detailed analysis. The way Mark would subtly tweak my finalized blueprints, removing my name from the title block, or rephrase my critical insights in meetings, making them sound like his own brilliant epiphany. It was a structural engineer's dream and nightmare rolled into one. Exactly the kind of challenge I thrived on. Mark naturally pitched it, promising architectural miracles. Richard greenlit it, seeing unparalleled prestige and profit margins. And I was tasked with actually making the damn thing stand. I spent 18 months on the Metropolis Tower. 18 months of grinding, meticulous work, often 90-hour weeks. Eating cold dinners at my oversized drafting table at 1 a.m., canceling every semblance of a social life. I meticulously designed the complex steel framework, simulated every stress point in earthquake scenarios, developed proprietary algorithms for wind load distribution, and built intricate 3D models that condensed terabytes of raw data into actionable, safe designs. It was, in my expert opinion, the most complex and critical piece of engineering our company had ever undertaken. Mark's involvement? He showed up for a few strategic check-ins, offered vague motivational platitudes about bending the laws of physics, and then spent most of the time on his phone, scrolling through golf scores. Richard's involvement? He demanded daily updates, always asking, "Is Mark happy with the progress? What's Mark's assessment of the timeline?" Never once did he ask me how I was managing the unprecedented technical challenges or what my concerns were. When the Metropolis Tower's core structural plans were finally ready for the critical City Review Board presentation, the final hurdle before construction could begin, they were, from my perspective, flawless. Every calculation checked, every safety factor exceeded. Mark, of course, was designated to present it. He would stand on stage, click through my 3D models, and take all the credit for his groundbreaking design. That's when I snapped. Not outwardly, not with a shouted word, but something inside me, that quiet, patient core that had endured years of invisibility, solidified into unyielding steel. I wouldn't let this slide. Not this time. The Metropolis Tower was my magnum opus, born of my intellect, my dedication, and endless hours. It was too important to be merely an ego boost for someone else. My retaliation began subtly, meticulously. I decided then and there that Mark and Richard were going to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating the quiet one. I started building my vault. Every email from Mark giving me vague instructions, every version control commit with my name on it, every timestamped document showing my logged hours. I didn't just save things, I cross-referenced everything. I built internal dashboards of our internal project management system that showed individual contributions down to the keystroke, all buried under layers of innocuous labels. My own personal digital forensic audit. But that wasn't enough. I knew Mark was a talker, a charismatic performer, not a true engineer. He could spin any situation. I needed something irrefutable, something that would expose his utter lack of understanding at the very moment he tried to claim my genius. So, in the dead of night, after I'd finished my official Metropolis Tower tasks, I began my true project. I called it Project Veritas. The Metropolis Tower was groundbreaking, yes, but its audacious design posed unique challenges. Specifically, the cantilevered observation deck and the complex, twisting facade introduced unprecedented torsional stresses at the lower core. My initial designs had accounted for this with a specialized, costly, reinforced concrete mix and an intricate network of shear walls. I had flagged this to Mark and Richard months ago, but they dismissed it as over-engineering, unnecessary cost, and impacting the aesthetic purity. They wanted good enough for the City Review Board presentation, pushing for a standard concrete mix and simpler, less intrusive internal supports to save money and preserve the clean architectural lines. I had, under direct instruction, incorporated their requested cost-saving changes into the official plans, making sure to document their specific sign-off on every deviation from my original, more robust design. I, however, knew their cost-saving measures were a ticking time bomb. The proposed design had a critical, catastrophic flaw. It would pass initial inspections, yes, but under certain plausible wind load and thermal expansion scenarios, particularly in the unique microclimate around the riverfront, the torsional forces would exceed the concrete's capacity, leading to eventual structural fatigue and, ultimately, a catastrophic failure. It was a slow-motion disaster waiting to happen, years down the line, but inevitable. Project Veritas was a highly advanced, independent, structural simulation model designed to precisely predict this long-term failure mode. It wasn't just about static loads. It incorporated dynamic environmental factors, material fatigue models, and probabilistic failure analysis that went far beyond standard industry software. It was a complex, elegant solution that confirmed my fears. The cost-saving design would fail. I knew no one else in Titan construction, not even Mark, had the specialized knowledge in advanced computational mechanics and multi-physics simulations to even understand it, let alone build it. I coded it entirely on my personal supercomputer, using open-source libraries and my own proprietary algorithms, ensuring there was no Titan IP on it whatsoever. It was my intellectual property, born of my expertise, fueled by my ethical outrage, and perfected in secret. My plan was simple. I would present Project Veritas and its findings to the City Review Board just after just enough to subtly prove authorship and highlight the catastrophic flaw they had willingly introduced. I wasn't looking for praise. I was looking for survival, for the future occupants of that tower, and for my own conscience. The day of the City Review Board presentation arrived. A high-stakes, closed-door event held in the City Hall's prestigious main chamber. Mark was the lead presenter for Titan Construction. The Metropolis Tower was the crown jewel. I was, predictably, relegated to technical support for the breakout Q&A sessions, a polite way of saying, stay out of the main spotlight. Richard had explicitly told me, Samantha, focus on having your calculations ready if the board drills down. Mark handles the big picture. The morning of the presentation, I arrived early. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I wore my usual, understated charcoal suit, blending into the background. Mark was already backstage, practicing his confident gestures, his smile dazzling even without an audience. Richard was coordinating with the city's planning department officials, his voice sharp, his eyes darting everywhere, ensuring no last-minute hitches. Neither noticed me beyond a perfunctory nod. I slipped into the main presentation chamber, a hushed, wood-paneled room filled with key city council members, architectural review board experts, and high-profile citizens. And there, in the front row, sat the person who would be my unwitting accomplice. Ms. Eleanor Hayes, a formidable, well-respected civil engineer and chair of the city's Structural Integrity Task Force. Eleanor Hayes was a legend in her field, known for her meticulous attention to detail and her unwavering commitment to public safety. She understood structural dynamics, truly understood them, in a way Mark never could. If anyone would notice the subtle flaws, it would be her. Mark's presentation began with all the usual fanfare, sleek 3D architectural renders, sweeping drone footage of the proposed site, buzzwords galore about sustainable design and urban reimagining. He spoke passionately about his visionary approach, his innovative use of materials, his tireless dedication to the Metropolis Tower project. The massive screens behind him displayed the stunning structural models I had painstakingly crafted. He was a master showman, and the board members were visibly impressed by his confidence and the sheer audacity of the design. But as he moved into the technical specifications of the tower's core, a tiny seed of doubt began to sprout. He was hitting his marks, yes, but his explanations were superficial. He glossed over the critical torsional stress calculations for the cantilevered. My moment arrived during the Q&A. Eleanor Hayes, known for her incisive, technically precise questions, raised her hand. Mr. Jensen, she began, her voice calm but piercing. The twisting geometry of the Metropolis Tower, particularly around the 300-meter mark and above, introduces significant torsional moments into the central core. Your documentation indicates a standard grade 60 concrete mix. Could you elaborate on your team's specific mitigation strategies for potential long-term fatigue and creep effects, especially under stochastic wind loading and thermal gradients? The question hung in the air, a technical precision missile designed to expose any weakness. Mark, who rarely dove deeper than surface-level explanations, visibly faltered. His confident smile wavered. "Ah, yes, Ms. Hayes, an excellent question," he blustered. "Our design employs a dynamic reinforcement strategy. We have several layers of ongoing monitoring, of course, to ensure optimal structural integrity." He gestured vaguely at the screens, looking increasingly uncomfortable. He was clearly floundering. The dynamic reinforcement strategy was a buzzword he'd picked up from a recent industry magazine, not a technical solution. Richard, sensing the shift, stepped forward. "Ms. Hayes, perhaps we can delve into the detailed material science in a private session? We have extensive engineering reports prepared." "No, Mr. Sterling," Eleanor Hayes interrupted, her gaze fixed on Mark. "I'm interested in the core engineering philosophy. Mr. Jensen, how does your system explicitly model the long-term torsional fatigue of your chosen concrete mix under continuous dynamic loading? And what are your probabilistic failure rates for a 25-year service life?" Mark's face went pale. He had no idea what probabilistic failure rates even meant in this context. He looked at Richard, then desperately scanned the room for a lifeline. His eyes landed on me, standing quietly at the back, near the technical support console. This was it. My heart pounded, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. This was the precise trap I had laid. Mark, in his arrogance, had ignored my specific, documented warnings about this flaw. He had connected the presentation system directly to the live internal network where the final design models resided simply because it was the fastest way to get the most up-to-date visual. He thought he was showcasing his work. He was, but he was also showcasing the critical flaw they had consciously ignored. I took a deep breath. I had one shot. Without moving from my spot, I reached for my tablet. It was connected to a discrete diagnostic interface I had built into. A faint, almost imperceptible red glow began to pulse at the base of the cantilevered observation deck, radiating down the central core structure. Below it, a new line of text, written in a subtle, almost academic font, appeared, overlaid onto the official presentation. "Warning: critical torsional stress exceedance, long-term fatigue. Veritas protocol, divergence from optimal structural integrity, probabilistic failure rate 25-year service life, 18.7%, catastrophic." The change was barely perceptible to the general audience, just a momentary ripple in the background visual. But to Eleanor Hayes, it was a thunderclap. Her eyes narrowed. She looked from the screen to Mark's panicked face, and then her gaze swept the room, searching. Mark, completely oblivious to the text, continued to stammer. "As you can see, Miss Hayes, the structure is incredibly resilient to all forces." "Resilient, yes," Eleanor Hayes said, her voice now dangerously calm. She pointed to the screen, her finger directly at the pulsing red glow and the overlaid text. "Mr. Jensen, can you explain the Veritas protocol that just indicated a critical torsional stress exceedance? And what exactly is an 18.7% probabilistic catastrophic failure rate over 25 years for your landmark tower?" Mark's jaw dropped. He actually looked behind him at the screen, his eyes widening in disbelief as he saw the stark red warning and the damning text. He sputtered. I'm not familiar with that specific notation. It's a system glitch, perhaps? My team handles the diagnostic layers." He glanced at Richard, who looked equally bewildered, his face turning an alarming shade of crimson as he saw the numbers. Eleanor Hayes slowly turned her head, her eyes sweeping the room. "Is there anyone here from the Titan Construction Group who can explain the Veritas protocol? The brilliance of predicting long-term structural fatigue and its precise failure probability is truly a game changer for public safety. I would very much like to speak to the person who integrated this into your model." Silence. Everyone looked at Mark and Richard. They looked at each other, trapped. Mark started to say something, but Eleanor Hayes cut him off with a raised hand. Her gaze, piercing, landed on me, standing quietly at the back. I met her eyes. She saw the faint red glow on the screen, then looked back at my calm, still face. A slow, knowing smile spread across her lips. "Ah," she said, her voice resonating through the hushed hall. "There you are." She walked past Mark and Richard, who stood frozen in place, and approached the back of the room. "Dr. Reynolds," she said, a deliberate emphasis on my last name. "I believe the credit for this critical analysis belongs to you." The room erupted in a storm of whispers. The fallout was swift and devastating. Eleanor Hayes, completely ignoring Mark and Richard, engaged me in a direct, highly technical conversation right there in front of the entire city review board. I explained Project Veritas, its methodology, its dire implications for the Metropolis Tower's current design, speaking with a clarity, precision, and ethical conviction that Mark could never have feigned. I didn't gloat. I didn't accuse. I simply presented irrefutable facts, backed by documented warnings from my vault. And the facts spoke volumes. Mark was publicly humiliated. He tried to interrupt, to claim it was a rogue internal test, but Eleanor Hayes's gaze was like a laser, cutting him off cold. Richard, realizing the scale of the disaster and the impending legal and public relations nightmare, looked utterly defeated, his face ashen. Within minutes, Eleanor Hayes had a private, intense conversation with the mayor and the city council chairman, who had rushed to the chamber, alerted by the unprecedented silence, followed by the sudden, panicked murmur. I later heard that Miss Hayes had laid out everything: my initial, safer designs, Mark's and Richard's insistence on cost-cutting deviations, and the fact that a truly revolutionary safety analysis, Project Veritas, had been developed by me, in secret, because my own company had dismissed my original, more robust concerns. She also confirmed that my vault of documentation made Titan's liability undeniable. Mark Jensen was fired within 24 hours, not just from our division, but from Titan Construction Group entirely. The official reason cited was gross negligence and failure to uphold engineering standards. I heard he tried to claim intellectual property on Project Veritas, but my meticulous records, time-stamped and independently verified, proved without a doubt that every line of code, every simulation was mine, developed on my own time, on my own equipment. He had nothing. Richard Sterling wasn't fired outright, but he was publicly reprimanded and swiftly demoted. He was moved to a newly created Special Compliance Division, essentially a corporate Siberia, with no team, no direct reports, and a massive pay cut. His once glittering career was over, not with a bang, but with a humiliating whimper. Titan Construction Group faced unprecedented scrutiny, massive fines, and a complete redesign mandate for the Metropolis Tower that would cost them hundreds of millions. Their stock plummeted. As for me, the CEO of Titan Construction, desperate to salvage what little reputation the company had left, offered me a newly created role, Chief Structural Integrity Officer, with a compensation package that made my old salary look like pocket change. I would have full autonomy, a dedicated elite team, and a direct line to the board, with the explicit mandate to ensure such a oversight never happened again. It was everything I had ever wanted in terms of influence and recognition. The morning after the board presentation, my phone rang. It was Eleanor Hayes. She offered me a position as head of urban development and safety for the city, with a blank check for budget and the complete freedom to build my own division, revolutionize public infrastructure safety standards, and ensure every major project in the city met unprecedented levels of structural integrity. She had seen my true worth, unburdened by corporate politics or ego. I took the job. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. It was about proving, not to them, but to myself, that my quiet competence and unwavering ethical commitment were more powerful than any flashy performance or corporate shortcut. I didn't want to operate in a system that valued optics and profit over genuine safety and contribution. I wanted to build something real, something enduring, with people who truly understood and appreciated the depth of work required to drive true innovation and protect public trust. It's been 3 years since that fateful presentation. I'm thriving as the head of urban development and safety for the city. My division has grown from a handful of dedicated engineers to a team of hundreds, all brilliant minds who value collaboration, ethical rigor, and genuine talent. Project Veritas, now expanded and fully integrated, is a cornerstone of our urban planning and safety protocols, credited worldwide. I've presented at international civil engineering conferences, not as Samantha who handles the detailed analysis, but as Dr. Samantha Reynolds, the visionary behind the groundbreaking Veritas protocol. My name is in engineering journals, safety standards, and yes, even city headlines, always associated with integrity and innovation. Mark Jensen? Last I heard, he's freelancing as a project management consultant for small residential builds, reportedly struggling to find even those. His reputation in the civil engineering world is in tatters. No one trusts him to deliver on anything complex. Richard Sterling quietly took an early retirement from Titan a year ago, likely forced out. His name rarely comes up in industry circles, usually followed by a knowing shake of the head. And Titan Construction Group? They eventually had to demolish the partially built Metropolis Tower due to the pervasive structural flaws I exposed, rebuilding it from scratch with a new design team and under direct, stringent oversight from my office. The project cost them an astronomical sum, and their reputation is still in recovery. They've struggled to secure major contracts, their stock continues to underperform, and they are now subject to constant audits. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that presentation, about Mark's bluster and Richard's dismissiveness. I think about the years I spent feeling unseen, undervalued, my warnings ignored. But then I remember the quiet satisfaction of building Project Veritas, line by line, simulation by simulation, knowing its true, life-saving power. I remember the look on Eleanor Hayes' face when she saw that pulsing red glow, the dawning realization of a catastrophe averted. It wasn't a shouted confrontation. It wasn't a public meltdown. It was quiet, meticulous work. It was believing in my own abilities when no one else would. It was letting my calculations speak for themselves. And that, Reddit, was the most satisfying revenge of all. So, if you're out there, the quiet one, the one always doing the real work, while someone else takes the credit, keep building, keep documenting, keep perfecting your craft in silence. Because when the moment comes, your true brilliance will be undeniable. And they will learn that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the most devastating power, not just to bring down corruption, but to build something truly lasting. Thanks for listening.